See everybody. How's everybody doing? Amazing. 2022 in review. So our Constitution states that I have to give a State of the Union address every year, actually the State of the Church, but I've oftentimes thought about having the presidential theme play as I came up, but I'm not sure if that's considered disrespectful or not, so I've always passed on it. I always thought it would be funny. What a year, right? 2022 has been something interesting. Just watching the world implode. Just watching it slowly decay from the inside out. It's been a lot of fun. Yeah. So we're going to talk a little bit about all that. We're going to talk about some attendance stuff. We're going to talk about some financial stuff. We're going to talk about ministry updates, what that all means, and then what we've got coming up for 2023, some of the exciting stuff that's going to be happening here then, so you guys can get an idea of exactly what's happening. I don't know about you guys, but when I think of 2023, there's one picture that comes to mind all the time. And it is this one right here. Do you remember when Emperor Palpatine, Joe Biden got up for his famous address to the nation when he was called half of Americans basically insurrectionists and threats to democracy? It kind of epitomizes exactly what we dealt with in 2022 and some of the things that are coming down the pipeline. We dealt with this speech in depth on the Liberty Rumble. If you had a chance to listen to those, and I encourage you to listen to them. We have two podcasts here actually that you might be interested in. You should pay attention to. The first one is Three Pastors Walk Into a Bar, and that one is, we did a lot of philosophical ideas. We have a lot of guests that we have come in and interview. Done some fun things this year, but mostly we interviewed a lot of the people that were running for office this year, which was really kind of nice, get to kind of know those people. And then the other one that we do is Liberty Rumble. Liberty Rumble is, who's involved with that, I wonder? So we deal with a lot of more current events on Liberty Rumble. We try to laugh a little bit because if you don't laugh, you'll cry as you're looking at all this stuff. And so, I'd encourage you guys to tune into those things, and you'll see a lot of the stuff that we've dealt with in our nation and in our society, our culture in general, and just how that's affected us as a community. And some of the big things that have happened just here recently have been the whole Protection of Marriage Act that was just signed into law by President Biden, and how that impacts churches in regards to gay marriage, because there's no language in that bill that protects churches from litigation should same-sex couples decide that they want to get married. Which is weird because 10 years ago they already had a law signed into effect that protected gay marriage, and also gay marriage is also legal and accepted in the state of Idaho. So I'm not really sure what they were trying to protect. They were double protecting what was already protecting, and it was all just a political scheme basically. To me it's sad to watch groups of people that are confused about life in general be manipulated and fooled into believing that these people actually care about them. And so that to me is sad. What's also sad to me is to continue to watch President Biden continue to be trotted out in front of people and embarrassed in the way that he is. It used to be funny to me, but now it's just gotten to the point where I feel like it's almost elder abuse at this point. It's gotten to the point where somebody needs to save that guy, because it's bad. And so, just some things coming down the line. I imagine that our lawyers are going to be busy next year. Maybe not ours particularly, but the organizations that we support, Christian Law Association and Alliance Defending Freedom, are going to be busy next year as communities rise up to bring litigation to churches. Because that's what happened with the cake baker, right? He won in the Supreme Court, and then as soon as he won in the Supreme Court, a person asked him to do a cake that honored the transitioning, I think it was the gender transitioning of their son, knowing full well that he's already made this stand. I mean, this is obviously a scheme to get him to say no again because they counted on him, standing to his standards. And, praise God for that guy for just sticking to his guns. But now they're bringing him into court again on this new case, just trying to destroy this guy. And churches used to have protections, but now with this new bill, it's very likely that we might see groups of LGBTQ communities come in and try and bring litigation to churches because they're not honoring the national federal standards for gay marriage protection, whatever the case may be. So just some things to think about that are on our radar. And then, couple all of that with just the wars and rumors of wars. You got Ukraine and Russia, you got China, you got all these different groups, and you have the pact between China and Saudi Arabia now, and you see the American petrodollar at risk. If you guys aren't following these things, I would encourage you to follow them. I don't think people really fully understand how much the U.S. currency is propped up on the fact that we trade oil on the U.S. dollar. If that changes, it could mean bad things for our economy. So just be looking for these things. There's a lot of stuff going on out there. What's funny is that while the United States of America is over here, we're worrying about our pronouns and we're worrying about who is offended over what, cultural appropriation or whatever other nonsense that we can come up with. China and Russia are building up their arms and becoming large, powerful armies. And when you demasculate a culture, it shouldn't be surprising to you that a masculine culture comes in and takes over a demasculated culture. Which is the plan, probably, in my opinion. I think that the recent trade for the gay or lesbian basketball player or whatever for the internationally known merchant of death. I'm not sure how that works out to be a fair trade, but in the culture of liberal ideology, that works out somehow. And so. These things are obviously leading up to something, and so 1 + 1 = 5 in Common Core math. So obviously, these things are leading up to something. So just something to think about. 2022 is setting the stage for a lot. And it seems to me like in 2022, the kind of racism kind of thing began to die out, and the LGBTQ thing began to rise up, and I think that was a clever strategy. We were talking to a dear lady about the public library system just the other day, and she was talking about how the LGBT community is kind of shuffling in under the radar. A lot of these kind of gender transitional sexuality books on, you can be a boy or you can be a girl, whichever one that you choose. And, they've been kind of sliding these things under the radar, and it seems to me like we've spent so much time arguing about race that the LGBTQ community just kind of starts sliding these things under the radar, and so that's something that's on the front as well. I had a guy talk to me this last year. He had some things going on, and there were some free speech issues. He was kind of upset because churches didn't rally around him to support his particular thing, and I was just telling him, what do you expect churches to do? Which fronts do we choose? Which battles do we pick? Do we pick just your battle, or do we pick this battle? And how thin do you think that we can spread? It's not as easy as saying, well, we got to fight critical race theory, or we got to fight LGBTQ, or we got to fight, we got to fight on the side of freedom, and we got to fight for free speech, and we got, all of those things simultaneously are under attack. Our doctrines and our institutions are under attack. All of those things are simultaneously under attack, and so understand that when you're looking at a church and you're saying, well, why aren't they fighting against this one particular thing? Well, it's probably because they're fighting on 6 or 7 other particular things. So kind of have a little bit of understanding and some patience with churches in today's day and age, because pastors and congregations are fighting with a lot. There's a lot to be thinking about, and to couple that with just the education of the congregation and just the continued discipleship of the congregation, the building up of mature believers, It's an insurmountable task. We're very blessed here at our church to have an incredible staff of people that support me to do the things that we do here. And they're here almost on a daily basis, working and serving you guys and making things happen. And they just do such a phenomenal job. We're going to be talking about some of our ministries here in a little bit and about what they're accomplishing and how amazing that they are at doing and running the ministries that they run. It's an incredible thing. You're going to see here in just a minute just how much we're doing here that you might not be aware of. And I would like to say this right up front. I'd like to apologize for the fact that you guys don't know as much as I think that you should. There's probably two pieces to that, and just being completely transparent. There's the first piece of that is just us getting the information out there, which is something we've had a conversation about, that we want to be a little bit better about being transparent about the things that we're doing so that you guys see exactly what's going on. I think the building fund, the building program is a good example of that. We've had some things out there. There's not been a whole lot of emphasis on it. And then there's a second piece of that, and that second piece of that is you. You do have to take some personal responsibility for finding information. One of the things that does frustrate me sometimes is when people come up to me and they say, well, I didn't know this was going on. I'm like, well, it was in the bulletin, it was announced, it's on the calendar, it's on the website, it's on the Facebook page, it's on the Instagram page. I don't really know what else to do other than to just put it on a piece of paper, ball it up, and just shove it in your mouth. You know what I mean? So there's two pieces of that. I'll take responsibility for my piece. I'd like for you to take responsibility for your piece and be more responsible about seeking out the information that's out there, because it is out there. We do a lot of stuff to make sure that you are aware of what's going on here. And so just be a little bit more aggressive about seeking out this information. That would be helpful. You know, one thing that you can always do is you can always contact your church council members. Our chair of our church council is here with us today. It's Ron Seeley. He's sitting right back there. Ron, say wave up. Hey. There's a number of them that are sitting in here today. I see Jake right here. If you're on the church council, raise your hand. Yeah, there's three of them right there. So they all sit on the church council. These guys meet once a month to make sure that the church is ran properly and to make sure that our policies and procedures are going in the correct path. And so they do an amazing work here, completely voluntary. And so thank God for those guys. Where was I at? The other things that we've been dealing with is just church growth and growth in our community. Our community is growing at an exponential rate. And if you doubt that, just drive into Coeur d'Alene on any given day. Even midday, even when everybody is supposed to be at work, it's just bonkers how crowded that it is. We were talking with Sheriff Norris on Three Pastors Walk Into a Bar not too long ago, and he was telling us that this Super One that we have is the most successful Super One in all of Idaho. Yep, it's the busiest Super One in all of Idaho. And that tells you that our area is growing somewhere in the area of 8 to 12% per annum, which is incredible. They're trying to get subdivisions built all over the place. People are resisting it. There's all this conflict that's going on. But the simple truth of it is that people are fleeing here because they want Christian conservative values. There's a lot of discussion about the fact that people are moving here and turning our state blue, and actually that's quite contrary. What we have discovered over the past few, or at least the past year, is that if anything, the influx of people has turned our state more red than anything else, which is good news. What that means is that there are people that are moving from California and Oregon and Washington and some of these other very liberal states, and they're moving up here because they want to hold on to Christian conservative values. And so you see a lot of arguments happening about the Republican Party and what the Republican Party looks like, and the whole rhino discussion. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on with all of that. So, like I said, there's plenty of fronts to fight on. Just pick one, right? And then on top of that, with the building project that we're working on and talking about expansion, and just growth in general. You know, what are the ethics of growth? What does worship look like? When is it right to grow? When is it wrong to grow? Is it right to grow just for growth's sake? Or is it, or should, but at what point should we be looking at planting another church and spawning another church from our church that's an independent body? I'll tell you this right now, as long as I'm sitting in this chair, we'll never be a multi-campus church. That's not going to happen. I don't believe in them. I think that they're, that model is flawed. There's a piece of me that battles with the whole ecumenical nature of that. It's almost like we're just kind of going back to Rome. You have a big church, and then you have all these little churches that pay the big church, and then, it just seems like this kind of overly corporate kind of structure. There's no, releasing these churches to be independent bodies in the communities that they live in. They're all kind of subservient to the larger church and the board that sits at the larger church, and it just doesn't seem right to me. I think if we're going to continue to grow, we grow outside of our building, what we need to be doing is we need to be planting a church, supporting a church, and then once they get on their feet, cut them loose and say, hey, go guys, do your thing. Amen. I think that's probably the best model that I can think of to manage growth in the long term. But then we have to ask ourselves, how big do we want to get, and how big do you need to be to accomplish those goals? We're not there yet. We're not at a place where we can financially support another church to get them going, but we're close, even the size that we are. So let's talk about some numbers, some attendance trends. This is the trends from 2020 all the way to 2022. And these are our numbers for first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, and fourth quarter averages. So you can see that 2020 was COVID year. That second quarter we shut down for like a month, and so the average was really low because nobody really knew what was going on. You can see in the third quarter we were back at it regardless of the mandates that were passed down to us from Chicken Little. And so we continued on from there. You can see the averages all the way across the board, and you can see the way that we have grown. We were talking last year about the fact that we wanted to kind of get back to 2019 numbers, and we have achieved that. We're already back at 2019 numbers. We want to start looking towards, what it looks like to continue to grow from there. But these are the averages per quarter of attendance. So first quarter, 196. That first quarter is like the quarter that's January to, January, February, March. Usually a little bit less attended because some of the folks don't like to come to those services because it's usually like it is today. Very snowy, the roads are rough. A lot of our older folks decide that they don't want to get out, which is fair enough. I can't blame them. But then you can see as that begins to fade away how the numbers increase exponentially in second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter. Our visitors per month tends to be about the same average, although we had slower numbers at the beginning and it seemed to increase exponentially towards the end of the year. So I think that's indicative of the fact that we have a lot of people that are settling in now. And I think that number is going to continue to grow even more as time goes on. Our average attendance for 2022 was 220 in attendance on any given Sunday. That fluctuates, of course, depending on what's going on, depending on how many people are involved in hunting season, and things like that always affect attendance. The weather affects attendance and things like that. But our average for the year was about 220 in attendance. We have 190 members. We have 209 people that are not members but regularly attend, and our working number of people that we deal with on a regular basis is 399. So if everybody in the church showed up at one time, we would not be able to seat them all. It's just wouldn't happen. In fact, if everybody in the church showed up for 2 services, we may not be able to seat them all. So there's this kind of dance that happens with the demographic where people will come and people will not come, and so there's any given Sunday, there's this give and take of people that are there and they're not there. You have some people that are here every Sunday, and that's great. But what we're looking at is we're looking at this year, we had a 13.4% growth in average attendance, which is pretty good. That's where we want to be at. 220 was right around our 2019 numbers, so we're back at that. We've recovered fully from COVID as far as I'm concerned. Although, even when our attendance dropped, we did not have any problems, because even when we were not attending, our people were faithfully giving and they were faithfully serving. And so we never suffered from the effects of COVID, but it is nice to be able to get back to those numbers, because you can see how they build consistency. And it's nice to have consistency to plan with, because one of the things that you can't do is you can't plan with inconsistency. It's just not something that's possible. So you plan for what you have, and then that's great. The one thing that does concern me on this page is the drastic decrease in baptisms. Talked about this last Sunday. I think this is an issue that we want to deal with this year. If you have a lack in baptisms, it's either because you're not promoting it very well. Well, there's a number of reasons. That would be one of them. The other reason is that we just aren't evangelizing, and that's a problem. But we are very discipleship focused here. This is not an evangelical or not an evangelistic service. This is a discipleship service. It always has been, and always will be. We count on you guys to do the work of the evangelists. We count on you guys to be telling people about Christ. We count on you guys to be inviting people to church. That's the model that God set before us. The go part of the go ye therefore is not intended for just one person. It's intended for the church, the body of believers. You guys are the ones that are to go out and do the work of the evangelist. And so we count on you guys to do that. And we're gonna push you this year to do that even more, to be a part of that even more. We're gonna be really focusing on not necessarily just evangelism, but just being Christ in our community, being Christ in the world that we live in. So there is that. Our financials this year turned out this way. We had a starting budget of $353,995. We had an ending budget of $364,995. Our total income for the year was $479,353. Our ending expenses were $353,363. So that gave us a net gain of about $125,989, which is a blessing. It means a couple of different things. First of all, it means that we've been raising money for the building. It means that people have been faithfully tithing, and it also means that our ministry leaders and the people that are responsible for budgets spent responsibly. We have some amazing people that serve here that do not just frivolously spend tons of money. We talk about things, we think about things, we consider things, and we try to do the best that we can to be wise with the money that God has given us and that you have entrusted us with. And so that's what we do. And just having a net gain at the end of the year, I think, is where we'd like to be at. We have been in situations where we've been in a negative gain, but that's been many, many years ago. It's been a long time since we've had a time where we did not meet budget, or we did not end up with money in the bank at the end of the year. So yeah, God's been good to us. It's amazing to me that in this time of inflation, in this time of approaching possible recession, that we have people that are giving in such a generous fashion, and we just want to thank you guys for that and ask you to just continue to do that, because if things should get rough, and if the recession should hit, and if people end up losing jobs and people can't afford to buy food, who are they going to turn to, right, in time of need? I can tell you who's going to be there. Will be the federal government. They will print money en masse to try and take care of people, to say, hey, we're the government, we're here to help. Remember when Ronald Reagan said that? The most dangerous words ever spoken. So we want to be able to help our community in the event that the worst should happen. And so we're preparing for that as well. You'll see here in just a little bit. Our financials, so this is what our averages for giving are per month in each quarter. And so you can see that, we do, God is really good to us. Our average monthly income is about $43,000. So that makes our trending income over the last 12 months $524,353, which drives our budget for the next year. So our 2023 budget is going to be about $431,563, which gives us a net projected gain of next year of $92,000, so to speak. God always blesses above and beyond, so we'll just see how that works out. But and depending on how the economy goes, we can't project those things, but we'll be prepared for them nonetheless. Missions. So let's talk about missions, because we changed our missions budget to reflect something different. We call it our visions budget. And our vision budget reflects the Go, Reach, Build. If you turn around and you look at the back door, there's a big plaque over the back door that says Go, Reach, and Build. This is our vision statement encapsulated in 3 symbols. We go into the world and preach the gospel. We reach out to our community and we build believers. These are the things that we do. Our mission statement, or our mission budget, was changed to reflect that ideology, because one of the things that we were running into when we were talking about missions budget, and our missions budget works a little bit differently here. We give a percentage of our tithes every month into a fund for missions. I think next year it's slated to be 15% of our total income will be put into the Vision Fund to use for missions endeavors, outreach stuff, in-reach stuff, things that fall into the category of our vision statement. The reason that happened, we had it set up a couple of different ways. Greg usually is in charge of all of our missions stuff, and he had a missions committee, and they would sit down and they would talk about the things that they were going to do, and they could never come up to a consensus about what that means. What is it defined as? And you would get people that would, they would argue that missions is all foreign missions, that it has to go overseas. That's what missions is. And then people would argue, no, missions can be anything. It can be local as well. Jerusalem, Judea, and Samaria. And you had these debates over whether or not, you should fund this because it's not a foreign mission, or you should fund this because it is a foreign mission, or, and there was just, there seemed to be a lot of confusion on what we were using that money for, and it stalled out the process severely. So we moved away from that model into a little bit more of an elder-ran model. So our elders, our pastoral staff, are in charge of the vision budget, and they as a staff determine what we do as far as missions is concerned, and you'll see how that's played out. By the way, if you look at this bottom picture, you might recognize this guy just by his demeanor, right? So this is our very own Rodney McCoy packing boxes. He made the front page of the Coeur d'Alene Press, right, Rod? Yeah, so Rod's right back there, by the way. He'll take autographs on the way out. So Go represents our missions outwardly, whether it's foreign or whether it's domestic, whatever the case may be. Reach is intended to speak to the reaching out of our community as far as outreach is concerned, helping out with community endeavors, helping out with food pantries, helping out with benevolence for people outside of our church, things of that nature. And build is basically building our disciple, or building our believers, building people up so that they may bear fruit as a natural progression of growth. Because if we're not investing in our own people for growth, then we will surely begin to degenerate. And so that's very important that we do that. And so that's all wrapped up into that kind of same ideal. Now, as far as missions is concerned, these are the things that we took on this year. Some of these we take them on monthly, some of them we did one-time things. But I'll just go through the list here so you see all the things that we did. The Jonah Project is a human trafficking program, anti-human trafficking program, I should say.
Words matter.
That is all right. Open Arms Real Choices Clinic, that's the folks that are the pro-life kind of anti-abortion group over there. Dr. Rick Hawk's been on the program, 3 pastors walking to our several times. Great people. Operation Christmas Child, of course, you might remember the boxes that were all lining across here. Alliance Defending Freedom is a ministry that takes on lawyers that will take on cases for churches in different ways. So we support 2 different groups in that, actually. We support the Alliance Defending Freedom, and then we also support the Christian Law Association, which I think is on here. Yeah, it's on the right-hand side. Compassion in Action is a school over in Nicaragua that we support. They've had a really hard time this year. They thought they were going to get shut down by the communist government that has moved in. But it seems like they're going to leave them alone for now, so let's just continue to pray that they stay open. The Kleinharts they're actually from this church. They used to be, he attended youth group here, and him and his family went over to China. They served over in China for a long time. They ended up having to leave China because they got discovered some of the computers at the International Mission Board got hacked, and a lot of the information about some of the missionaries got released, and the Chinese government picked up on that, and so they had to grab their go bags and leave everything behind and get out of China. So they are out of there. They're serving in another place now, serving people in the Chinese language or Mandarin language or whatever it ends up being. So they're doing great work now. I'm not going to tell you where they're at, but they're serving, doing great work. People from our church. I think that's amazing to have people from our church, Athol, Idaho, out there serving in a larger community of people, preaching the Word of God. So you're investing in the gospel, guys. Every time that you put something in the offering plate, you are investing in the mission of the Great Commission. New Hope for Adopted International Missions. You might know, you might have seen, if you've been to either one of our services, a dear lady sitting in the front. Her name is Sandra Motes, and she has a whole bevy of Asian children that accompany her. That is her mission, and her, even in her late years, she is still working to make sure that she saves Asian children that are brought over to the country to be adopted, but then they come over, they have special needs, or they have behavioral issues, and the families determine that they can't handle them, and instead of them getting pushed into the I can't remember, the name escapes me at the moment, but I'll think of it in a minute. But instead of releasing them into the care of the government, she tries to take them in and sometimes finds homes and families for them. So it's amazing work that they do. We still support the Northwest Baptist Convention, even though we don't support the Southern Baptist Convention. Randy Adams and those guys are doing some amazing work with the Northwest Baptist Convention, planting churches and foreign language churches. There's a lot of Korean churches in the Northwest Baptist Convention, and so there's a lot of great work going on there. We have a whole, if you've gone by, you've seen all the vinyl banners that we put out over the course of the year. We advertise for the Athol Farmers Market. We do a lot of things for the community on that board, and so there's a larger conversation about that, because it seems like every time we get one of them darn signs and we put it up, there's a windstorm that rips it apart. I think every one of them we bought have had that problem, and so there's a larger conversation about how we manage that whole deal. We supported the athletics department at North Idaho Christian School just here recently. We did Help Protectors Peak, which is an organization that takes on officers to have a retreat for them to unwind, help them deal with PTSD and some of the stresses that come with first responders. They take police officers and firemen and emergency workers of all types. We support a church plant over in Spokane called the Rock Church. Zach Minton is the pastor there. They're just some amazing evangelism work over there. They're really struggling to try and stay open with the close. They had a building that they were working in, and the fire department came in and shut them down. Said that they were not allowed to meet there anymore, and so they have had to rent out spaces to try and survive. And all of their congregation, even though they're doing fairly well, I think they're averaging about 100, but all of their congregation are new believers. They have no mature believers, and so these people have not been have not been discipled in such a way that they're faithful in their giving, and a lot of them can't give because they don't have any money. And so they're doing some great work over there at the Rock, and we appreciate the efforts that they're doing, so we support them monthly. Union Gospel Mission, we support them monthly. In fact, we just had the ladies from the Women and Children's Center down in Coeur d'Alene, and just did a podcast with them here recently, and I encourage you to go look at that. There's really great stuff going on there. Christian Law Association, Athol Elementary, we supported them through Adopt a School, so we do a lot of stuff over in the elementary school. We have a great relationship with them. We support Voices of Martyrs, Delivering Hope International, Athol's Farmer Market, Wounded Warrior Project. We purchase our daily breads through there. We have a group called H46, which admittedly is disheveled right now because of my inability to focus on it. But it's a great thought, and we want to continue to build on it. And the idea is that this is a group of individuals that go to community meetings and record and take notes so that we can hold our elected officials responsible for moral issues. And when those things arise. And we usually utilize that information to transport that information into our Liberty Rumble podcast, or at least that's the goal of it at some point. And so just pray for those guys. We've got some great guys that are faithful to it. There's like 3 guys that are faithful to it, and we would like to have a lot more than that, but I mean, truthfully, I just haven't set up any meetings for it, so because I've just got too much going on. The Athol Chamber of Commerce, we support Idaho, which is a safe home for, it provides safe homes for women and children potentially that are in dangerous situations or need to get out of the houses that they're in. And then we do the Tree of Sharing every year. So, and this is just part of it. This does not encompass the entirety of all that we have done for missions, but this is the largest bulk of it. There's all kinds of little things that we did throughout the year to kind of to help different missions and different groups and different people in our community, or whatever the case may be. All in all, we spent $74,607.20 on missions last year. So that's a great number. It's higher than the previous year. I think the previous year was 64 or 65, if I remember correctly. So with growth and with the growth of our budget, that just means that we're able to do more. And even with that, we still ended up with an excess in our missions budget. And so thank you guys for all of that. I think we still have about $12,000 left in there that we could use until the end of the year. And you would think, well, just go ahead and give that money to people. It's just not that simple, because when you start talking about just like giving $12,000 out to people, it's just not that simple, okay, guys? It's not like you just write a check down. There's careful consideration that goes into those things, and obviously we don't want to be in a position where we're just writing blank checks to people and that kind of thing. We want to be careful about the money that we have. And so there's consideration that goes into that. And so if we don't get it spent, then it just gets absorbed back into the general fund next year, and we'll do something else with it. So it all comes from the same place. So it really is kind of a neat operation. It just kind of goes back in, and maybe we put it towards the building fund. Maybe we do any other myriad of things with it that we decide to do with it. So God is good, though. God is good. Let's talk about some ministries, some of the ministries that you may or may not know about. First of all, we have our deacons. They meet monthly to discuss things. They've had some great things going on here. We ordained a new deacon this year, Lucas Sheets. Are you in here, Lucas? There you are. Lucas, stand up. Thank you, Lucas. We have some other people that are sitting in, getting ready to train up to potentially be a deacon. So there's a probationary period where they kind of, see if this is the right fit for you, and then they kind of set you up to go with that. We do have some sad news as far as the deacon front is going, and that is that Roger is going to be stepping down as head deacon this year. So, Roger, love you, buddy. All right, come on. I'm going to make Roger cry. Yeah, I didn't. I'm glad you pointed that out. I didn't even notice that was there. So Roger has been our head deacon for a while, but Roger has been a deacon here ever since he's been here. It's been some time. And in all of my years of ministry, I've been in ministry leading as a pastor, associate pastor in some capacity for 25 years. And in that time period, I can probably name on one hand the number of people that I feel exemplify what a deacon is. And Roger Friesen is at the top of that list. But what's going to happen is there's going to be a transition, so Rod McCoy, come on up. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, wow, we're trading that for that? So they're passing the baton. The 31st of December will be Roger's last day as a head deacon here, but that's not Roger's last day serving the Lord. And so we're thankful for Roger and thankful for Patty, who supported him every step of the way, kept him straight. So thank you guys. God bless you. Thank you. All right, get out. So yeah, like I said, there's some guys that are sitting in right now trying to decide whether it's going to be a right fit for them. And I think the last time we talked, there was plans to possibly seek out potentially 2 more new deacons because the workload was just that high. So you might be approached by one of the deacons to ask if you'd be interested in sitting in on that. We don't do nominations for deacons. The deacons are selected; they're handpicked, and so. We're very picky about this because you have to fit into a very specific category of philosophy to be considered for deacons. But they've done some great work, these deacons. One of the things that they have done over the last year is they've really managed our benevolence stuff, and our benevolence is pretty active. We do gas cards and Super One cards that we have here at the church. Typically when people come along and they ask for things, then we keep an eye on it. There's a process for following along in that, but we have them here if anybody has a desperate need. We don't get that here as much as I've done at other places. When I was pastoring in the inner city down in Florida, we used to get people like on a daily basis. They would stop by with their gas can and well, down the road, I'm trying to get to my poor wife who's dying of cancer in Birmingham, and I need, some money to get down the road, and that was like a daily thing. There's so many people dying of cancer in Birmingham that it's a tough thing because you want to be benevolent, you don't want to be, and sometimes the best tack to take is just to do the best you can to help them like God sorted it out. That philosophy changed a little bit after talking with the Union Gospel Mission, Phil Altmeyer, and some of the things that he made comment about how to deal with homeless population and benevolence in general. So our philosophy has changed quite a bit. That's one of the things that they're doing is working on a new benevolence policy and how we effectively help people. We helped Deputy Kress in that time of need. Provided propane for 2 families, purchased some batteries for some vehicles, filled 2 vehicles with fuel to help the driver get to a safer environment. We filled 25-gallon buckets with emergency food, and we've got that stored, so in case there's a worst-case scenario type situation, we should be able to make soup for people, because we think that's important. And so that's going to be a continuing thing that we work on over time. Approximately $12,000 was spent in total with just benevolence, and so we are a benevolent church. We try to help people the best that we can, but still be wise about the things that we do. So that's something that is ongoing. Small groups, we have about 240 people actively enrolled in small groups, 175 total enrolled in other classes. There are open groups. If you're interested in being a part of a small group, we need you to put it on your connection card so that our leader for small groups, we have a pastor who is involved with small groups, and that is Ken Billing. Ken, great man. He's also one of the 3 pastors that walks into a bar, so just in case and he is always looking to help you get inserted into a community of believers that you can worship, not only worship with, but study with and grow with, so that you may produce fruit as what? A natural progression of growth. Yes, that's one of the things we do here. We have Drop Point, which is an amazing group that is training our young men in self-reliance and training them to be confident men of God through the Bible, bushcraft, and boldness. If you come here on any given Sunday night, you're potentially going to see all of them out there around campfires. And if you've driven down the driveway and you've looked over to your right and you thought to yourself, why are those homeless encampments over there? Those aren't homeless encampments. Those are the shelters that our boys have built so that they can do their bushcraft. And so some of the guys that are really involved with that are here today. If you're involved in Drop Point, would you raise your hand? Yeah, we have some of our elders that are here. Great work. We have a new program that has replaced Love Cube. You remember last year we had Love Cube. This year we have a group called Grow. They've transitioned into a little bit more of a self-reliance discipleship program for young girls and to help them to have a secure and confident walk with Jesus Christ. And I don't see Christine in here today. What's that? Oh, is she upstairs? Okay, so Christine Seitz is in charge of that. If you work with Grow, raise your hand if you're in here today. Hey, I love how some of you guys raise your hand. This is the shy race. So basically what we want to do is we want our people, to our young people to grow and mature, to be productive followers of Christ, because we want them to bear fruit as what? A natural progression of growth. Yes. Children's ministry. They spent the year going through the Gospel Project. That's just basically going through the entire Bible. They have 1 kids worship service, first service with 3 teachers. They're rotating a staff of 18 monitors and 4 youth volunteers. So there's a truckload of people involved with that. You would think with all those people that we could have a second service for kids worship, but it just doesn't work that way. We need volunteers for a second service. We'd love to have people that would like to work with children to put it on your connection card, let Ms. Kim know, and she can get you plugged in with that. We're always needing people to work in children's ministry. Whether that's children's ministry or even like the nursery, going all the way back to preschool, because we don't have a nursery here. We have a preschool. And our kids are even taught in that young group. So some of you guys have kids that you dropped off at the preschool today. They will sing and they will be taught a Bible lesson, and it'll be very fun. And you get to come in here and enjoy the service. Isn't that wonderful? If we want to perpetuate that, then we need to be involved in that process. They average about 25 kids, ranging anywhere from the ages of 5 to 12. So there's 2 classes upstairs going on at any given time. Great stuff. Our youth ministry is full of life. If you want to get exhausted, come and watch a youth group night. Happens on Monday nights. My wife runs that. They are super active. They're going bowling, they're going laser tag, and they're going all over the place. They took a rafting trip. We have some seniors that are in our youth group right now that we're taking on a senior trip to North Carolina to a youth camp called the Wilds. This is an amazing youth camp for their senior trip, and so there's some great things going on there. They did Bible studies all year long, and for the summer they meet in our backyard, and we grill out, and we play volleyball, and we play out and we destroyed my grass, which is great. They were working through the disciples, and then they did the Fox's Book of Martyrs, and the whole concept was feeding the right dog. So, the dog that wins the fight is the one that gets fed the most. And so that's kind of the whole point. We want them to feed the spiritual component of their life so that when they're faced with that conflict with the flesh, the spirit wins. Youth and VBS, it's phenomenal. They did a Friendsgiving. Some teams work with our SWAT program. And this year's focus is going to be going deeper. So our youth group is different than other youth groups. We don't, much like church, I should probably just tell you what's going on here, guys. So we did youth group as other churches do youth group for a while. It was very evangelistically driven. We were asking kids from the community to come in. The one thing that we noticed is that when you added that component into a group of young people, you didn't have those people rising to the level of the most mature kids that you had. You had the mature kids that you had digressing to the level of the lowest common denominator. And statistically, it just didn't work out, spiritually speaking. And so we shifted gears. We wanted it to be more discipleship driven again. And I know you're thinking that this is all inwardly focused. It doesn't have to be, if we're all taking responsibility for evangelism. But what we ended up with a whole group of young people from our church and from churches that are in our community. They came in and they took on great strides of discipleship and growth and maturity, because ultimately what we want them to do is we want them to produce fruit as what? Amen. Progression of growth, right? So that's kind of the whole point when we switched focus on youth group. Our administrative team is working phenomenally hard. Our administrative team consists of Jackie Ralston, Sue McMahon, and Kim Antone. Sue is here. There's Sue. Hey, Sue. They have done amazing work in keeping everything organized, keeping us running, keeping us scheduled. Just the amount of stuff that goes through the office here is, I don't even know where to begin. Yeah, they process the visitors card, or they process the connection cards is one of the things that they do. That's one thing that Sue does every Monday is she gets to come in and I walk by the door and look in the window and there's Sue and there's the computer and she's got little connection cards. And she has to parse all the things out, she has to send the requests to the right group. She has to put the people's prayer requests in the right category. Some prayer requests they want published, some people don't want prayer requests published, so there's two different prayer request lists that are put out every week, one that is published and one that is private that just goes to our staff. They're just filtering people that want to be involved in different communities, people that just want to give praises, people that just want to have someone call them or contact them. Maybe they're having some personal issues in their life, they need a counselor. There's a lot of things that go on with those connection cards. I want to stress to you guys the importance of the connection cards. It seems trivial, it seems aggravating to have to put in your information and all that kind of stuff, but quite honestly, guys, those connection cards really help us to not have people fall through the cracks. One thing that I'm just going to talk to you about a pet peeve, okay? Just for a second. Because this is another area where you can take personal responsibility. You're coming to church for a while, and then you decide, I don't want to come to church anymore. I want to see what happens. Okay, well, first of all, that's unfair. Second of all, if you just drop off the face of the planet and no one contacts you, I'm sorry, but that's what you get. That communication is a two-way street, and this idea that somehow when you start attending a church that if you aren't there, that everybody should have red flags go off and say, my goodness, so-and-so didn't show up, we better make sure that we contact them. That idea it's fine in a church of 30. In a church of 400, not possible. Not possible. We try our best to make sure that we're looking out for potential areas of concern that we need to address. But quite honestly, guys, if you're going to be out or you're unhappy about something or you want to make sure that we're looking and tracking you really need to put it on a connection card so it gets on our radar, because if you just decide to disappear, then disappear you probably will. I don't mean to be, harsh or overly pragmatic, but that's just the way that it is. And so we will do better at trying to track those things if you will do better about keeping us informed about what's going on in your life. I think that's a fair exchange. It's a two-way street. We'll work on that over the course of the year and try and get that connection a little bit better. Greg usually brings it up at staff meetings, like who has not been here in a while that we need to be praying for. So we do that, but I just ask you, I mean, if you can't be here, like you get sick or you end up in the hospital, if you end up in the hospital and you don't tell us, you don't get to be mad if we don't know. I don't really know what to say about that. So we had 68 first-time visitors processed through the assimilation track, which is our track that we put people into to help them transition into small groups or becoming a regular attender, et cetera, et cetera. We did 70 background checks this year and CSUP training. CSUP training is our children protection training. I don't know of a church that has a more robust children's protection program than we do. We have an extremely, exactly. It's something we should be proud of. We've actually had people leave because our children's protection program was too robust. It was too limiting. And I was like, okay. I mean, if that's the linchpin, then I guess that's just the way that it's got to be. More power to you. I hope that works out for you. But each of those things requires 2 minimum follow-ups, and so the ladies in the office are just tracking those things all the time. We're working on a different application process and some front-end training to get the ministry leaders a little bit more front-end trained in that and a little bit more active in that. So I'm trying to do things to help to alleviate some of the load that these ladies are bearing in the front office, and you just don't understand that, coupled with, that it goes even farther than that, because you have our clerk who is processing memberships all the time. Our clerk's going to be retiring here pretty soon, and we're going to have to figure out what we're going to do with that. And so, I mean, it's my mom, so I'm going to wrangle her in there somehow. Gotta work on that. Connection card follow-ups, 1,107. So that's how many follow-ups that we had just off the cards. And then just numerous policies and procedures and job description changes and assorted administrative responsibilities that go along with that, processing human resources stuff, learning human resources stuff. And as time changes and as we go forward and as we continue to grow, more of these things become painfully apparent that you just have to have some things in place to protect you. I mean, what you did as a church of 25 is no longer applicable, so you have to have policies and procedures. I know that's boring. Nobody likes to talk about policies and procedures. Well, not some people like Jackie likes to talk about policies and procedures. Jackie's a big fan. She's our office manager. She loves policies and procedures. It's like she wants to have 5 or 6 a week. They float around in red folders. If you're walking down the hallway down here and you see a red folder sitting in someone's door, or you see a red folder, that's a policy or procedure or job description that is making the rounds to go to final approval at the church council. So, yeah, they happen a lot. And oftentimes at staff meetings, what you have is you have Jackie going, does anybody have that policy? Because it ends up in somebody's office and then it just sits there for a while because they forget about it. So 2023 will be a year focusing on training and putting systems in place to do training. One of the things that we are deficient in is just continuing to get an education on the front end. Our church council members, God bless them, they entered into this position to be a church council member. The problem is that none of them received any training to do that job, so they just walked into it and sat at the table and said, okay, here I am, what do I do? Finance committee is the same way. A lot of our ministries that are really key role players, we don't really have a lot of training because, when we were smaller, it was just like, okay, this is how we do it, right? Well, when you got so much stuff going on, there's no longer that shake the hand conversation, hey, this is how you do it. That just doesn't happen because of the tyranny of the urgent. And so we need a system for bringing people in and training them in the positions that they're doing. And for volunteers as well. I mean, if you're volunteering to serve and perhaps you don't know where you want to serve at, we want to have something that we can show you, start you in, so that you can get to a finish line. I gotta hurry up. Men's ministry, monthly breakfast attended by 15 to 20 men. Rod and Boyd usually do the cooking for that. And a lot of our men did devotions for that. So that's on Saturday. What is it? The first Saturday? First Saturday of every month. If you're into breakfast, I would go to it. It's a lot of fun. I only go to the prime rib dinner because I don't do breakfast, so I usually wait until the prime rib dinner and then I go to the thing. Or unless they're doing steak for breakfast. If they do steak for breakfast, I might show up for that. But quite honestly, Friday and Saturday are my family days, and so it's very difficult for you to get me to go do anything churchy on Friday and Saturday. It just doesn't happen. Unless there's just a real serious thing that needs to be taken care of. Or if there's steak. There's always exceptions to every rule, general exceptions. The prime rib dinner was great. There was about 60 men there. Phil Altmaier gave the speech, the speaker. He was the speaker, and he talked a lot about some of the things that they do and about being men in general. It was really good. So this year, putting it all together, as expected, our attendance numbers are back to 2019 levels. A few years after COVID. Our working number is evidently increasing. Our workload, but the number of baptisms is a little concerning. Financially speaking, God's people are faithful and God is able. We operated within budget parameters, and so far we have raised roughly $450,000 for a new building. One of the things that you're going to be seeing in the new year, you're going to be seeing a massive campaign to highlight the building and to also continue to raise funds for that, because we need a minimum of at least $150,000 more to really solidify that. We were shooting for $600,000 to begin with. We may need more than that. We don't know exactly how that's all going to pan out, our current economy, but it sure would be nice to have $600,000 in the bank so that we can have some confidence in moving forward. But we have some gentlemen that are working on that. In fact, all of that has been piled into the lap of the trustees because I have no time to deal with it. When I was dealing with it, it was handled terribly because it was like fifth priority. So the gentleman that has really been instrumental in moving that forward has been Kerry Cates. Amazing work he's doing, and is going to continue to do on that, hopefully. Let's hope that you're going to continue that, right? Because we need it. So that's good news. Missions giving and spending was increased in prior years, and even though we've lowered the percentage, we're still going to have as much, if not more. And if you want to continue to give specifically to Vision Fund, you can do that as well. Or if you want to designate, I want to give this certain amount to the Vision Fund, you can certainly do that as well. Although we don't prefer that, we prefer you to just run a check to the church for all of your giving. But if you are dead set on designating funds for missions, then you can certainly do that. We've had steady growth, and so if we continue to see that growth for 2023, there's no telling where God can take us at the end of the year. So we'll see what happens in 2023. Things to look for: capital fundraising campaign to round off what we need to construct the building, an administrative focus on training matrices to onboard volunteers, continuing education for key roles, organizational shifts and solidifying organizational charts and governance structures here to help to expedite some of the work that we're doing. Search for an additional pastoral staff member will begin this year, and also a search for potentially 2 additional deacons will happen this year. Out of the gate, we will need to fill 3 positions. We have a pastoral staff admin that we need to fill, we have a worship leader position that we're going to need to fill, and we have a building and grounds manager that we're going to need to fill. So these are 3 things that we need to fill pretty immediately. And so we've got some irons in the fire. Don't panic. All right, don't panic about some of those things. So see the wheels turning out there. All right, so don't panic. It's a new job description that has to be offered at the beginning of the year. It's just the way that things go. So yeah, don't freak out. These are just things to look forward to. Next year, 2023, our theme, do good together. We're going to learn the difference between doing good and being kind, and what it means to be one of those things without the other. What it means to be productive and benevolent, as opposed to non-productive and benevolent. You know, there's preferences to being good, and being good is not as easy as you think that it is. And we need to know the difference, because if we're going to be stepping into our community for the purpose of evangelism and for the purpose of helping the community, it would be helpful to know what goodness is and what the difference between goodness and kindness is. And I've known plenty of good people that offered no kindness, and plenty of kind people that offered no goodness. And if you want to know what all of that means, then you're going to need to attend services in the new year to learn it. I got about 30 seconds for questions. Any questions? Robin?
Have we thought about having a class on baptism, what it means to our church?
We have baptismal interviews. So anybody that puts on their card that they want to be baptized, they're interviewed by a pastor.
Would it be more of an open group?
There are no plans to have a baptism class at this point. We've had baptism classes in the past, and they are very poorly attended and are a lot of work to put together. So we switched over to an interview model because it just made more sense to interview people that were interested in baptism. If the number of people that want to be baptized changes and is exponentially larger, then yeah, maybe we'll shift gears to consider that at this time. Any other questions?
So those attendance numbers, they children, is that just adults?
That's everybody in the building. Yep, everybody in the building. Anything else? This is your opportunity. I don't know. Are you done? If you're done, I'm done.
How much square footage do you plan on adding
Square footage?
to the building?
Well, what we're planning on adding is an addition outside for a larger foyer space so that we have an entry and exit out of the building, along with office space to open up these rooms back here for classes and such. What it will add to this building as far as seating is concerned, the sound booth will end up moving into where the kitchen is at, because we will have a new kitchen over in the new building. So it'll open up the entire back for seating, and then this entryway potentially could be opened up for seating going all the way back. So the entry to the auditorium will be the current front doors. And then there will be doors in front of that will be fire doors, but that's kind of the plan as far as adding seating is concerned. The adding to this building is a whole different animal altogether, and that would have to happen in a different phase, because we would have to figure out how we wanted to expand this building if we did want to expand it, if we ethically wanted to do that. And then how we would do that, we need to bring the entire building up to code as far as like fire sprinkler systems and things like that. And so the cost to expand this building could be high. So it would be a building that we have to do it in phases and chunks, and if we don't want to get in debt. And we could do like a lot of churches, and we could just get into millions of dollars of debt and build us a nice big sanctuary and all that kind of stuff. But I just am not a big fan of bringing the church into debt. I just don't think that's a place where we need to be right now, especially with the recession. So, did that answer your question? More or less? More or less. I don't know the specific number because I'm not involved in that too much. But I know that we will be I think we did the math, Rod. How many seats was it?
65 seats.
About 65 seats will be added.
3,500 square feet in the new section.
So the new section is 3,500 square feet. Okay. So yeah, any other questions? Yes.
I have a question. Cindy Parker sent out just different people pictures of this church when it was first being built. It is quite amazing. Most people have no idea the work that went into it when the structure was first built. And it was quite amazing to see the progression of this church when it started.
Yeah. You want to hear some fun stories about how the building was built? Talk to Greg. He was here when it was built. So interesting stuff. One more question. We got time for one more question. All right. We'll ask the worship team to come on up. Thank you guys again for everything that you do, for the part that you are in supporting this. it's not only just the ministry team, it's not only just the staff, not only just the pastoral staff of the deacons. You know, all of those people are in key roles, but it could not be done without you guys being faithful and serving and doing what you're doing. So we really, really appreciate you. Let's have a word of prayer and then we'll turn it over. Father, we thank you so much for just being there for us and providing for us. Father, we are thankful for the growth in our area. And Father, I just pray that you would allow us to continue to serve you, that you would understand, and I think that you know that we are honored to be able to serve you, and I pray that you would let that continue in an even greater fashion. Father, direct our steps. Help us to see where it is that we need to be, what we need to be doing, and we will just give you all the glory for it. In your Son's precious name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right, you guys did me a favor. Stand up.